What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I'm your host, Emma Lingan, and I'm joined today by Michael Augello and Jim Parsons of the Hockey News, coming at you to talk about all the latest and greatest and some not so great storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. But before we do, I want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right. Well, I mentioned we've got some topics good, some not so good. Let's start with the latter. Dean Evason fired from the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was fired as head coach, and assistant coach Steve McCarthy also fired on Monday. Of course, the Blue Jackets have already hired veteran coach Rick Bowness to take Evason's place. Evason had a record just over 500. He was 59, 52, and 16 in his 2 seasons as head coach with Columbus. And remember, Bowness had last appeared as a head coach with the Winnipeg Jets back in 2024. He was there from 2022 to 24. He, of course, led the Jets to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Mike, what do you make of this decision? Do you think that this was a good move for Columbus, and was Bowness the right replacement?
It's strange. I mean, we see what's happened over the last few years with Columbus, with the failed hiring of Mike Babcock to Pascal Vincent, replacing him. That was a disaster. And then they bring in Evason. And, Evason, from all reports, is a good coach. He was a good coach in Minnesota, and I think got a lot out of the Blue Jackets last year, missing the playoffs by a point or two. In the wake of the Johnny Gaudreau tragedy, everything sort of coalesced, and a lot of their young players stepped to the forefront. That has not happened as much this year. They're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. I guess Don Waddell thought it was time for a change, or thought that the chemistry was not working there. I mean, Bowness is a good coach. He's coached 9 NHL teams, but this doesn't strike me as a long-term fix. I mean, we haven't heard if it's interim or not. We haven't heard how long the contract is. He may just be coming in to be a stopgap for the rest of the season, and then they do a coaching search in the offseason. But it struck me as a little strange. There's no questioning. Bowness has a reputation of being a very good communicator with his players, and if that's the case, then that's what they'll get out of him.
Yeah, I think the thought was that Bowness was in retirement mode already, and then to see him coming back into a head coach role. Jim, what do you think of this move for him and for Columbus?
I'm guessing it's probably a temporary thing. I think Elliot Friedman actually tweeted today that the deal is he'll coach till the end of the year, and then they'll go from there and see what's up. This is the kind of guy that's got the experience that, to me, it reads, let's take one more crack at this. Let's see if we can't get ourselves into a playoff spot, because this is a guy who's been there, done that, has a ton of experience coaching different rosters and different teams. And if anybody can maybe do that on a short term, because you always get that coaching bump, right? If he's the guy that can do it, then maybe we got a shot at it. And from there, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that he's clearly loves the game. He clearly loves coaching. He's done it in multiple places and multiple times, and up and down his career. Maybe he's up for, an extension of some kind, if that's something that they want to look at. But I would guess they'll probably re-examine this in the summer and then try to go, okay, well, who's the best fit here? Did Bowness push us towards this? Were we in the conversation at the end of the season? And could this be a guy that can get something out of this club? Or do we need to find, a younger coach, a more permanent coach, somebody who can kind of go the same direction that we're taking this team? So for now, I think it's temporary, and maybe one last crack at the playoffs, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Dean Evason, of course, not the only coach who is on the hot seat right now in the NHL. A couple other names have definitely come up in the rumor mill, which tends to happen around this time of year. Mike, I'm going to throw a couple names at you, and you tell me whose seat you think is hotter right now in the NHL. That is Scott Arniel in Winnipeg or Sheldon Keefe in New Jersey. Now, just a reminder, Winnipeg has won just 4 in their last 25 games. They've got the second worst power play in the league during that time after winning the President's Trophy last year, mind you. And then the Devils have lost 15 of their last 25 in regulation and have the third worst penalty kill in the NHL during that span. So, Arniel, Keefe, who do you think has the hotter seat right now?
Well, if we're playing coaching musical chairs, I mean, these are both second-year coaches in their current places. You know, Keefe came from Toronto. Arniel, I believe, coached Columbus as a head coach previously and had been an assistant for a while and was an assistant, I believe, to Bowness in Winnipeg before taking the job. I think probably Arniel has more of a rope because he won the President's Trophy, because everything went right last year. But I honestly don't think that either one of them are in a position where they're about to get fired. But if I had to choose one of the two, it would be Keefe. But I think Tom Fitzgerald is in more trouble in New Jersey than Keefe is, and it might be a situation where after 2 years there, and Fitzgerald being there for a while, that the ownership of the Devils decides to make a clean sweep. But the hot seat in the league is fickle. If you remember, about a month ago, Craig Berube in Toronto was on the hot seat. Lindy Ruff, after the firing of Kevin Adams, was on the hot seat. And neither one of them are on the hot seat anymore. So I'll choose Keefe, but I don't think he's significantly hot right now.
I'll go devil's advocate here, and I'll say Scar Neal, just because the Winnipeg Jets have fallen so far from where they were last season. I don't necessarily think they were a President's Trophy winning team. I think, like Michael said, everything went right for them. I don't think they're as bad as they've been this season, though, and I think you're going to have to point the finger to somebody. I believe the Jets are probably in a situation where they're going to have to make some kind of change, whether it's a roster change, trades, or something. And typically when that is the feeling in a franchise, it's the coach that's the first one to go. Like, I think Cheveldayoff could be in trouble. I think there could be trades out of Winnipeg. But the easiest thing to fix or the easiest thing to change is the coach. So in that situation, I'm going to probably go with Arniel.
Well, both of those guys definitely names to keep an eye on regardless as we move forward this season. Some more unfortunate news this week coming out of Tampa Bay. Brayden Point injured immediately after scoring a goal against the Philadelphia Flyers on Monday. He fell awkwardly while he got tangled up with Cam York. He had to be helped off the ice. Lightning head coach John Cooper did not have an update on his status, but given the timing of the injury, his availability for Team Canada with the Olympics now could be in serious question. So, Mike, if Point is out long term, who do you think is the first player up to fill in for him with Team Canada?
Well, the indications yesterday, people who saw John Cooper in the post game said he had a sort of a forlorn look on his face that didn't sound like it was optimistic that Point could, they could be out for a while. Well, he's a scorer. He's an offensive creator. So you would think that they would go in the direction of someone like Connor Bedard or maybe Wyatt Johnston. I think probably Bedard makes more sense because but he's strictly a center, and I don't know whether he can play wing and center, whereas Johnston might be able to play both positions. They have enough players who can move in and out. I think they're more concerned with experience and defensive ability, and Bedard is a dynamic offensive performer, but defensively, I think he's still finding his way. It doesn't sound like if Point is out that the guy like Sam Bennett would be a selection, because Sam Bennett's more of a grinder and a sandpapery guy. And I think if they lose Point, they're going to want somebody who can create offensively. So I would say I would lean toward Johnston and probably Bedard as the second choice.
Yeah, well, I would have said Sam Bennett because I think he's probably the guy that most people assumed would be the first alternate call if anybody went down, right? Any forward gone down, it probably would be Sam Bennett. But there's a few things, like Michael points out, he's a different style of player. He's a different shot. So Point's a right, Bennett's a left. So you have to consider all of those things. I do think, though, that they don't mind the grinder idea. I think he can generate offense. He's proven it this latter half of the season, or at least after the slow start that he had. Mark Scheifele might be an option. I think that could be somebody you might look at. And then I do think Connor Bedard could be one, too. But for some reason, I get this feeling like maybe Team Canada is just not necessarily sold on Bedard, that maybe this isn't his year, that next year would be the year that or not next year, but the next round of Olympics would be the time to really have Bedard be a centerpiece on that team. But maybe this isn't that time. So I think Bedard could be an option, and I think he'd be a good option, to be honest. But I don't know that Team Canada is sold on that.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see definitely what ends up happening there. Hopefully, of course, the injury to Point, nothing too serious. Hopefully, a speedy recovery there. Moving on to some trade talk here. We've got, of course, the New York Rangers continuing to struggle. And there's been speculation as a result that they could be looking to trade Artemi Panarin before he becomes a UFA this summer. Panarin, of course, has led the Rangers in points all 7 seasons he's played there. He signed there as a free agent in 2019. He's the kind of player that rarely becomes available via trade, I think. And if the Rangers are deciding to go through a full retool here, Mike, do you think that we'll see a major bidding war for Panarin? And what kind of teams do you think would be pursuing him? Keeping in mind he's got a full no move clause, so he would have to have the final say. But assuming that, he does waive that, then where could you see him going?
Well, he's only going to go someplace if he wants to go someplace. And it would make no sense that he would not want to go someplace, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, and putting a show on in the playoffs would just, I think, increase his value. I mean, he's 34 years old. He's still a great player. I don't think a team in free agency is going to give him a 6 or 7 year contract like Brad Marchand, but I think he could get a 4 or 5 year contract. But it's going to be up to him. So who would I say would be in the mix? Well, teams that are contenders that have cap space, and you would have to look at someone like Dallas. They would have to put Tyler Seguin on season-ending LTIR, and if that was the case, then they would have over $9 million in cap space to do that. Maybe Colorado, but that would also factor in whether Gabriel Landeskog is injured seriously. Again, doesn't sound like it's something that's going to keep him out for the rest of the season, but. And if it's not those teams, then, the only teams that really have the cap space to make that kind of move are the Anaheims and the Chicagos and the San Jose's. But I don't know if any of those teams are really significant. They're not contenders. They could make the playoffs, but that's the problem. He's an $11.6 million cap hit, and it's really tough unless the Rangers retain 50%, which would make sense, because if they want to move them, that you're going to need to do that. But even at a little over $5.5 million in cap space, it's going to be tough for some of these contending teams to fit him in.
That's true. It's a tough spot for the Rangers to be in right now. Jim, what kind of teams do you think could be after Panarin at the trade deadline if he does become available?
Well, I think the question is will there be a bidding war is probably the most important part here. I think it's, and Michael brings up Brad Marchand. I think that's a good comparison, right? We saw this last season when he was rumored to go to a bunch of different teams. Everybody was in on Brad Marchand, but the reality was he knew where he wanted to go. He had it narrowed down to like maybe 2, maybe 3 teams. I think Florida and Toronto, and then maybe another team, and that was it. So he had total control over where he was going to go, and I think Panarin's in the same situation. So we'll hear a lot of speculation early on when it comes to him, but the reality is it might be 2 teams, maybe 3 that look at this, because he won't consider anybody else, right? It's going to be like Colorado maybe could be an option. I think Minnesota might be an interesting option when you've got Kaprizov. He's the same agent. I think there's a lot that they could do there. I think Bill Guerin is looking to take another swing, and I think that this is the season that he might go in. And I remember the last video I was on, I said, I don't know if this is the year for Minnesota, but if he becomes an option for them, I think that maybe that would change their perspective and their narrative. So I think that's an interesting one. And I don't think you ever rule out Florida, right? No matter what their situation is, they're always in on everything. And to a player like Panarin, how can you not consider a team like the Florida Panthers, right? So I think there'll be a handful of teams. Will there be a bidding war? Probably not. I think 2 or 3 teams are going to find out they're in the conversation, and that'll be the only 2 that he's probably looking at, and that'll be where it goes. But I think there'll be some interest there for sure.
And Emma, if Florida is in the mix, then they'll likely have to put Barkov on season-ending LTIR because they won't be able to fit him. But if they do that, if they're convinced that Barkov can't come back, then Panarin going there would make a lot of sense.
course, some other names on the trade block right now. Of course, we've got Elliot Friedman reporting out of Carolina this week that the Hurricanes are listening to offers on Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So Kotkaniemi has not been having a good year so far. 2 goals and 6 points in 25 games. He was left off of Finland's Olympic roster. He's averaging just over 11 minutes of ice time, which is a career low for him. He's been a healthy scratch multiple times already this season for Carolina. So he's 25 years old. He's signed through the 2029-2030 campaign at a $4.82 million cap hit. So, I mean, it's a lot of term, but not a lot of money, especially with the cap going up. And if this is a textbook kind of fresh start candidate, and maybe he could figure it out somewhere else, Mike, which teams do you think would make the most sense for Kotkaniemi?
Well, it would depend on a team believing that he can somehow get back to the form that he had when he was with Montreal and the first couple years in Carolina. He has sort of lost himself. I think it's not surprising that he wasn't selected for the Finnish Olympic team because, as you said, he only has 2 goals this season. He seemed to sort of fall off the radar, so to speak. The one team that I think would make a little bit of sense because they just traded a veteran center and their other great center is retiring is the LA Kings. But that, again, that's under the assumption that they believe in him and think that he can sort of bounce back. One option that nobody's talking about, but I think is potentially something that the Hurricanes could do, based on the fact that Kotkaniemi is 25 years old, they could buy him out of the last 4 years of his contract. The buyout would be 1/3 of the value instead of 2/3 against the cap. And it's less than $1 million in cap hit for 8 years. Now, if they can find somebody to take the contract on, then probably that's the better way. But if they can't and they're not sold on him, then the buyout is a potential option.
Well, the buyout narrative is interesting because you think here, this is, there was the whole offer sheet fiasco with Montreal, and then they tried to offer sheet Sebastian Aho. So this was kind of a big moment for the Carolina Hurricanes when they got Kotkaniemi. So I would think that maybe they wouldn't be so quick to buy him out or give up on him. They'd want to try and explore the trade avenue as well. But Jim, what do you think could make sense as a potential landing spot for this player?
Well, I've dug into this a little bit, and from what I can understand, Kotkaniemi is not a player the Carolina Hurricanes just want to dump. I think they're looking to actually make a trade for this player. The team that sort of screams maybe out of left field, but feels like this would maybe all over it, is the Vancouver Canucks. There's just something about that organization where they'll take on a player that maybe other teams don't want to go near because they figure they can do something with this player. And with Vancouver, there's just so much going on. There's so many balls in the air. There's so many irons in the fire. Like, they could move anybody. Kiefer Sherwood, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, Tyler Myers. Like, all these people could be somebody they consider trading, and Connor Garland, all that stuff. And I think if Carolina's looking to make a trade and Vancouver is not, for whatever reason, completely sold on a rebuild, even though Patrick Allvin did say they're transitioning into a rebuild, this could be a player that they somehow talk themselves into going, we can make this guy work, right? So Vancouver could be an interesting option because if they want to make a hockey trade, Vancouver's looking to make a lot of hockey trades. So that could be an interesting one. Whether or not he's able to get back to the form that he was when he was with the Canadiens, and then, like Michael said at the beginning of Carolina, I don't know. But maybe Vancouver's a team, because they have so much action and so many conversations going on, they figure maybe we'll take a flyer on this guy.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I didn't think about that, but could be a good thing. Maybe takes a little bit of the pressure off of him if he goes to a place like Vancouver, but we'll see. Definitely a name worth monitoring as we get closer to the deadline. Another name that I want to talk about, not in trade talks, but a name that has been getting a lot of buzz recently, that's Macklin Celebrini. We are past the halfway point in the regular season, and the San Jose Sharks firmly in the playoff race, due in large part to Celebrini. He has not slowed down. He's 3rd in the league in scoring right now with 70 points in 45 games. So considering the strength of the Sharks roster, or I guess maybe more aptly put, the lack thereof, compared to other players at the top of the league in scoring. Mike, do you think Celebrini could be considered for Hart Trophy votes this season?
I think he'll definitely be in the mix, and your point is well made that they're not a strong team around him, and the fact that he's third in the league in scoring with 70 points at this point is amazing in his second year in the NHL. But that being said, if the Sharks don't make the playoffs, the likelihood of him getting in the top 3 of Hart Trophy nominations is probably remote. You'd have to say that McKinnon and Makar with the Avalanche, with the year that they're having, would be there. Obviously Connor McDavid has taken up a permanent residence at the top of the Hart Trophy consideration in Draisaitl as well. And the guy that I don't think anybody really is talking about is Nikita Kucherov. I mean, with Tampa Bay having as many injuries as they've had all year, and he's got 67 points right now, I think he's going to be in the mix. So I give full credit to Celebrini, but I think they would have to make the playoffs, and he'd probably have to finish in the top 2 or 3 to garner a top 3 slot for the Hart.
Jim, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's in the conversation already. When you nailed the big thing here is that you look at that roster. Tyler Toffoli, I think, is second to him with 32 points, and Celebrini's got 70, right? So Celebrini has got them in a wild card spot in the playoffs kind of on his own. Like, there's some good players on that San Jose team, but Celebrini's the guy. Whereas, now I'll put an asterisk on this. If Connor McDavid keeps playing the way that he's been playing over the last couple of weeks, he's a shoo-in. Like, there's just no other person that's even going to get close if he continues to do what he's doing. He might be playing the best hockey of his career. But when you talk about McDavid, it's hard not to talk about Draisaitl. When you talk about McKinnon, it's hard not to talk about Makar. Right now, if you're talking about San Jose, you're talking about Celebrini, and he's just getting better and better and better. So if he continues to, kind of trend upward, he's going to be in the conversation for sure. I think some of these guys are going to have to tail off, though. I think McDavid will have to tail off for him to really be in the conversation. But right now, I think he's firmly in that conversation.
Well, unlike the San Jose Sharks, the Anaheim Ducks have fallen out of the playoff race recently. Of course, they've lost 13 of their last 15 games, really kind of tumbled back down to earth here. They are in the midst of a 9-game losing streak. They've allowed 5.25 goals against during that stretch, and their scoring has just cooled off dramatically. So, Mike, do you think this is an indication that the Ducks aren't ready to contend just yet, like many had anticipated that they would be after they had such a hot start? Or do you think this can kind of be chalked up to just normal ups and downs of a season?
I think it's a little more than just a down in an up and down season. I saw them in Buffalo on Tuesday, and they were sleepwalking through that game at 4-0 until late in the third period when they woke up and scored 3 goals. I think some of the young guys, I mean, Cutter Gauthier is having a fantastic year. He's got 20 goals right now, and Leo Carlson's leading the team. But, Seneca has slowed down a little bit, and some of the veterans that they brought in, like Chris Kreider, who started off the season like a house on fire, he has slowed down as well. There's not a ton of veteran support around them, which is one of the reasons why, I know that there were rumors about Andrew Mangiapane, Jim, going to Anaheim, that they were looking to add him as a sort of a third line mid-six support player. They probably need those type of players. Quenneville can coach up the team with the best of them, but if there's not enough there, then it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Jim, what do you think this could mean for the Ducks moving forward? Is this just something they kind of have to let play out, or do you think that they should be more aggressive, maybe in trying to get to that spot to where they are contenders?
I think patience is probably what they're going to have to do here. Like I believe at the beginning of the season, if you had talked about the Anaheim Ducks, you were kind of surprised they were where they were at. Like, there was a really nice mix of the young players with the veterans that they did have sort of meshing and being better than everybody thought they were going to be. And I think we thought this about teams like Pittsburgh and stuff like that, who also had hot starts. Anaheim's just sort of come back down to the reality of what we thought they might be as a team. I don't think this is going to be a club that does anything prior to the Olympic roster freeze. I think they'll wait it out, see how they play until that point, and then kind of make a decision after that break is over. I don't foresee the Ducks making a push. Like, I don't imagine that they're going to go into the trade line as heavy buyers trying to salvage the season. I think they're like 1 year away from kind of really being in the mix, in the conversation, adding a couple pieces that they think will make them a better team overall. I think everything just sort of aligned right at the beginning of the year, and they're probably coming down to what they really are this season. So at that point, if you know that's what your team is, because it continues to be that way over the next couple of weeks, you're probably not trying to buy. You're probably just going, you know what we are. And next year will be a little better. And then you kind of keep going from there and build slowly.
All right. Well, Jim, since we have you here today, do want to ask you about the Oilers. Of course, biggest news recently is that the Oilers are activating Tristan Jarry off of IR. So they've now got 3 goalies currently on their roster. Of course, Jarry, Calvin Pickard, and Connor Ingram. Ingram beginning to string together some solid starts for the Oilers lately, but of course he is also waiver exempt, making him obviously the easiest to move back down to the AHL to clear a spot. So do you think that the Oilers have a long-term decision to make on who they want in net for the final half of the season, or do you think it's pretty much decided?
No, I don't think it's decided, and I don't know if it's necessarily long-term yet. I think they've got 9 days to figure this out, right? Connor Ingram's in a situation where 10-game mark or 30 games with the team since his recall, he can go down and be waiver exempt, and he's coming on that pretty quick. He's 9 days away from that, and I think he's played well enough to be in the conversation. He's had 6 out of 7 really solid games. He had 1 kind of a clunker, but he's played much better than I think anybody thought they would. They look at this player and they go, technically, he might be the best of the 3 goalies. He's not the most athletic, and he's definitely not the star that they are thinking could be a starter, but he's been very solid, very calm, very poised. Coming up from the AHL to the NHL, it's just a different game for him, and it suits him better, right? Having said that, if the Oilers decide they want to keep him around, they're going to have to probably do something. They're keeping 3 goalies right now, but they'll only do that short term. Calvin Pickard is a real risk if they put him on waivers. I think somebody will pick him up. He's too cheap. He's too good a backup. He hasn't had the greatest season, but there's a lot of teams that could use him on a really smaller contract that would love to have him as a playoff backup. So I don't think the Oilers are eager to put him on waivers because I'm pretty sure they know they'll lose him. And Jarry coming back, this is the guy that they're betting on. They traded Stuart Skinner. They think he's going to be their starter. So they're going to have 3 goalies, but only for about 9 days. And I don't know that they know yet if they're going to move Ingram. I think that's the easiest solution. I think it's the one that makes the most sense. But they're trying to talk themselves out of not doing that because he's playing really well. So it's going to be interesting in a few days here because they have to make a decision pretty quick.
Well, and you bring up Pickard too. Of course, his playoff pedigree is worth noting as well as a reason that he would get snatched up almost immediately if you put him on waivers, I think. Mike, what do you see happening in Edmonton, or are you just kind of sitting back with the rest of us saying, let's let this play out and see what happens?
Sitting back and eating popcorn. No, I'll just say this. If they did put Calvin Pickard on waivers, there's a team in Jim's nation's capital that would claim him in about 2 seconds, because right now they have James Reimer, who couldn't stop a beach ball in the preseason and in an AHL game. And the Linus Ullmark situation, the way it's playing out, they don't know when he's going to be back. I mean, yeah, I think Stan Bowman is under the pressure that I don't know if he can depend on Tristan Jarry to stay healthy. That's been the book with him with Pittsburgh. Pickard has a goals against of 3.68 right now. And Ingram, other than 1 season and a short playoff stint, really has been inconsistent in his NHL career. That's why, like, the names of Alex Lyon from Buffalo and even Anthony Stolarz in Toronto, who's just coming back from an injury, have been cropping up in the rumor mill as potential targets for the Edmonton Oilers. They need to win. They need to win now. With Connor McDavid under contract for another couple of years, I think that's the motivation for everything. And I think nothing will stop Stan Bowman from upgrading his goaltending before the deadline.
Well, of course, if you want to read any more about the Oilers, their ongoing goaltending saga, or any of the other players, teams, topics that we've discussed today, you can head over to the Hockey News. Of course, the Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. that is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and listened to us talking some hockey today. We do appreciate it. We'll be back with an all-new episode later this week. For Mike Augello and Jim Parsons, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.